Good morning, it's July 22nd. This is To My Liberal Friends, and before you start listening, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Well, the axe is finally falling on National Public Radio and the public broadcast system. Congress cut the funding, and there's good news and bad news in this action. Liberals are wailing and gnashing their teeth, making all kinds of dire predictions. But there is a solution, but nobody seems to want to look at it. For most of its history, PBS has been something that the American public enjoyed. They produce wonderful programs for both children and adults. Masterpiece theater is something my wife and I enjoy, and there's a source of good, clean entertainment without the nudity and sex that seems to permeate the rest of the entertainment world. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and that was the home of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. It started on WQED and was part of the PBS lineup. It was the longest running series on TV until Sesame Street finally surpassed it. It was something that kids flocked to watch, and their parents made sure they could. All these type of shows could have run forever with little to no controversy. But National Public Radio ruined the enterprise. It took a signature public news show to an endless partisan rant. And I've listened to the Democrats decry this cut in funding. I'll agree with them that it will harm the smaller PBS stations out there. Cutting $9 billion in funding means they'll have to try and make up those funds somehow, or they'll have to begin cutting staff. Paula Kerger, the president and CEO of PBS, warned that even though the network gets a small share of its funding from federal sources, it will still have to look at scaling back. Quote, "We will obviously have to make some hard decisions about what we're able to continue to do and how much resource we'll have," end quote. That's like any business. Democrats have made some ludicrous statements. They claim it will eliminate the sole source of emergency information, particularly in rural and tribal areas where public broadcasting may be the only source of news and alerts. Now, how many of you believe that pablum? In today's world, we're awash with media. When the public broadcast system was created, there were 3 major television broadcasting stations and then local radio stations. Today we have the internet and cable television blasting at us 24 hours a day. There's more sources of news than you can count, and PBS and NPR are not near the top of that list. The average working man and woman is not listening to NPR. People in rural areas are not listening to NPR. Their primary audiences are high-income liberals in urban areas who love to dive into their echo chamber to try and somehow reinforce their own political views. And that's what they got from NPR and the news on PBS. The New York Times could not argue the bias, so they tried to deflect it with some mathematical analysis that only those I just mentioned would vaguely understand. Quoting the Times, Republicans complain, not always wrongly, that public media reflects left-leaning assumptions and biases, and they can fairly tell NPR and PBS to do a better job of reflecting the citizenry that subsidize them. Yet the national part of NPR, as it used to call itself, that chafes conservatives may well be just fine without federal funds. Only 2% of its budget comes directly from the federal government, and it may have an easier time raising money from its many dedicated listeners if Congress punishes it, end quote. Actually, the New York Times got it right. They can raise the money. The CEO of NPR, Catherine Mayer, now says she regretted calling Trump a rare, fascist, racist, sociopath trifecta. Do you really think she really regrets it, or she just regrets Congress exposing it and using it against her? As she addressed whistleblower Uri Berliner's concerns, the former senior editor at NPR, by noting NPR could have covered the Hunter Biden laptop story more aggressively or sooner. However, when NPR sued to counter a Trump executive order canceling funding, Mayer took a different tone. In a defiant statement, she pointed out that Trump's order ending taxpayer subsidization of biased media likely violated the First Amendment on viewpoint discrimination grounds by promising to cease indirect funding. In other words, even if NPR is biased, the White House can't tell member stations not to buy it. But guess what? Congress can say, and they don't have to fund that bias, and now they've ceased funding it. If you search for the word patriotism on the PBS site, you get these gems. Quote, "Black patriotism, when love of country means holding it accountable." Or another, quote, "As American turns a year older, polls find patriotism has slipped a bit." Now the favorite one is, "Greatness is not a given. America the Beautiful asks how we can do better." Now, this was a piece about Catherine Lee Bates, the author of America the Beautiful poem, which she wrote at the moment of inspiration on top of Pikes Peak. NPR, however, apparently wanted to make sure audiences knew America the Beautiful isn't all happiness and sunshine, not triumph and claptrap but a still-waving flag like the national anthem. Rather, this young feminist poet, who had just emerged from deep depression, according to PBS, is asking the nation, can we ever live up to its high ideals? Maybe with time and enough ludicrous features like this, we can get seventh inning crowds everywhere to sing, "America, do better." But as I said, there is a solution. All NPR and public broadcasting system have to do is eliminate the news division. Stick to the programs that people are actually watching. Start to think about removing the bias that people are complaining about. Start hiring people that have divergent political views and make sure the staff is equally divided between conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats. But that's not what Democrats and other liberals want. They like the bias and they want it to continue, and now they're reaping what they sowed. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.